We start with this huge breaking news story. Daniel Khalife, a 21-year-old serving member of the British Army who is awaiting trial for Terror and Official Secrets Act offences, escaped from Wandsworth prison at about 10 to 8 this morning. It is said that he was dressed as a chef clinging to the underneath of a delivery van. I am going to go straight away now to our Home and Security editor, Mark White. He's outside New Scotland Yard for the very latest on this. Mark.
Well, Patrick, I've just been speaking to Commander Dominic Murphy, who is head of Counter-Terrorism Command here at Scotland Yard, and the man who is leading what he said was a nationwide manhunt in search of this escaped prisoner. This is what he told me just a few minutes ago. Commander Murphy, tell us, if you would, what exactly happened this morning at 7:50?
So around 7:50 this morning, Daniel Khalife, who is a man who was on remand following a counter-terrorism investigation, escaped from Wandsworth prison and is currently at large somewhere in the UK.
And in terms of how he escaped, we're told that he was wearing chef's paraphernalia, chef's uniform, and that he may have clung to the underside of a food delivery truck. Do you know that to be the case?
Well, I can say that he was, yes, wearing checkered red and white trousers and a white T-shirt and brown boots when he escaped from prison. As to how he escaped, that's entirely a matter for the prison service. Clearly it will form part of our investigation. That's a matter for the prison service.
Do you know if this young man was actually someone who worked within the kitchens?
Well, we have some information that we're working with the prison very closely to understand all of his movements within the prison. But yes, the description of his clothing would suggest that he was at the time working in the kitchens.
Tell us about the nature of the manhunt that's underway now.
So we have officers and staff from across London and counter-terrorism policing, so across the country. As is normally the case in these matters, we have published the details of Daniel Khalife to officer colleagues around the country and borders colleagues as well. Our intention here is to try and find him as quick as possible. I believe very strongly that he presents a low risk to the public, but nonetheless, he's an individual who was on remand and should be in custody, and we're doing everything we can to try and find him as quick as possible.
I mean, he is a terror suspect facing a court case at some point on terrorism charges. He may be clearly he's determined to get away. From that point of view, anyway, there's clearly a potential risk to the public.
Yeah, we think that risk is very low, and I'm confident, having been part of the investigation that originally investigated Daniel Khalife, that risk is very low to the public. But as you'll know, it's an ongoing investigation, so it's very difficult for me to talk about details of the charges that Daniel Khalife was on remand for, because he's yet to stand trial for those charges.
And do you believe that he is still in the local area, or could he be further afield now?
Well, we are focusing our search for him in the London area. He has connections to London, but we are also working with colleagues around the country to try and locate him in other locations. He has been linked to the northwest of the country in the past, so we're working with others to try and find him wherever he may be.
I know it's early stages, but from what you've been able to assess so far, does this look like an organised attempt in which there may have been others who helped this individual, or an opportunist escape?
Well, as you say, it's very early stages in order for us to think about things like that, and those are really matters for the prison service. We will, of course, be working with them very closely as part of our investigation, but those are questions probably for the future for the prison service. Right now, my focus is on asking the public, and ultimately this is the public that's going to help us find him, to ring 999 and come back to us with as much information as possible, and we'll deploy officers and try and locate Daniel Khalife as quick as possible. And
we appreciate you talking to us. We know it's the early stages and all, but just finally on that point, in terms of the operation to find him, that is going to involve what to ensure that he doesn't get out of the country?
Well, as I mentioned to you earlier, we have sent his details around the whole country, so we've put notifications to all forces in the UK, and of course we've been working with borders colleagues, borders policing, but also the immigration service to work out how we can have additional checks at the border to understand the risk of him leaving the country. But clearly we need to balance those checks with the impact on the public, but that's a matter for those colleagues that are working in the border today.
So, Commander Dominic Murphy confirming to me there that this is effectively a nationwide manhunt. They are concentrating, of course, some or a lot of the resources in the London area, because that's where he was last seen, outside Wandsworth Prison, and he has connections to Kingston, which is also in southwest London, but also some points of interest coming out in that interview from the commander, confirming that this young man also has connections to the northwest of England, so inquiries being made there, and in addition to that, to ensure that there's no way that this individual can leave the country. A very significant upstepping of the security protocols around all the main exit points out of the country, so your airports and your ferry ports, to ensure that this escaped prisoner doesn't exit the UK via that way. Also, I think what was interesting from the interview with the commander was the confirmation of the news that we brought to you, that he was indeed wearing a chef's uniform when he escaped, and the confirmation, it seems, the information that the commander has, having spoken to the prison services, is that he was working in the kitchen itself. So that explains, of course, how he managed to get access to a prison uniform. What the senior officer was unable really to confirm for me at this stage was the information we brought to you, that he was clinging to a delivery truck, perhaps the underside of that delivery truck. That he's not willing to share with us at this particular stage. The other, I think, point of note from that interview was the calculation from Commander Murphy that as far as this escaped prisoner is concerned, they believe that although he, of course, is facing terrorism charges, that he did escape from prison, they don't believe that he poses a significant threat to members of the public. Having said that, members of the public are being told not to approach him, but to dial 999.